Hello friends, welcome to my story nights. Tonight's story is entitled The Unexpected Journey. Enjoy listening. Elliot Stevens was a creature of habit. At 35, his life was a meticulous routine of work, gym, and quiet evenings in his high-rise apartment. As a financial analyst in a prestigious firm, he prided himself on his structured, predictable life. Chaos was the enemy, stability was his sanctuary. One Wednesday morning, Elliot's world was turned upside down. He received a call from his sister, Mia, who lived on the other side of the country. Mia was a free spirit, the polar opposite of Elliot. She had traveled the world, taken risks, and lived life on her terms. Despite their differences, they shared a close bond. Mia's voice trembled with urgency. "I need your help. Can you come to New York? It's about Mum." Their mother, Lydia, had always been the rock of the family. Even though she had been living in a small town in upstate New York, she was still the glue that held them together. Elliot's heart raced. What's wrong? Is she okay? Mia hesitated. She's fine, physically. But she's been acting. Strange, forgetful. And she refuses to see a doctor. "I need you here, please." Elliot took a deep breath, his mind spinning. He couldn't just drop everything. His work, his responsibilities, but Mia's plea echoed in his ears. "I'll be there as soon as I can." The next day, Elliot found himself on a plane to New York. The city was a stark contrast to his orderly life in San Francisco. The noise, the crowds, the chaos, it was overwhelming. Mia met him at the airport, her usually vibrant demeanor subdued. "Thanks for coming," she said, hugging him tightly. "I know this isn't easy for you." Elliot managed a tight smile. "What's going on with Mum?" Mia sighed as they walked to her car. She's been forgetting things, important things. Dates, names, even how to get home from the grocery store. I've tried talking to her about seeing a doctor, but she just brushes it off. Elliot frowned. "And Dad?" Mia's eyes darkened. "He left 2 months ago, said he couldn't handle it anymore." The news hit Elliot like a punch to the gut. Their father had always been distant, but abandoning their mother in her time of need was unforgivable. "What can we do?" Mia shook her head. "I don't know, but we need to figure it out together." They drove to their mother's house, a quaint little cottage surrounded by trees. Lydia was in the garden, her hands covered in dirt as she tended to her flowers. She looked up and smiled when she saw Elliot, but there was a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "Elliot, darling." "What a surprise," she exclaimed, wiping her hands on her apron and hugging him. "I wasn't expecting you." Elliot forced a smile. "Just thought I'd visit. How are you, Mum?" Lydia waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, keeping busy. Mia worries too much. I'm perfectly fine." Elliot exchanged a worried glance with Mia. Inside, the house was a mix of clutter and charm, filled with memories of their childhood. They sat in the living room, Lydia chattering away about her garden and the neighbours. "Mum," Elliot said gently, "Mia mentioned you've been having some trouble remembering things." Lydia's expression hardened. "Nonsense. I'm just getting old, that's all. No need to fuss." "Maybe it's worth seeing a doctor, just to be sure," Elliot pressed. Lydia's eyes flashed with defiance. "I said I'm fine. Now, let's not talk about that anymore." Frustrated, Elliot knew pushing further wouldn't help. They spent the afternoon with Lydia, trying to bring some semblance of normalcy to the day. But Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. That night, after Lydia had gone to bed, Elliot and Mia sat in the kitchen, discussing their next steps. "We can't force her to see a doctor," Mia said, her voice tinged with despair. "But we can't just do nothing." Elliot nodded. "Maybe there's another way. If we can understand what's causing her memory lapses, we might find a solution." Mia looked skeptical. "How?" Elliot pondered. "There might be something in the house, a clue to what's triggering this. It's a long shot, but we need to try." The next morning they began their search. They sifted through old photo albums, letters and documents, looking for anything unusual. As the day wore on, Elliot stumbled upon an old journal hidden at the back of a drawer in Lydia's bedroom. The leather-bound book was worn and faded, its pages filled with delicate handwriting. Elliot called Mia over, and they began to read. The journal chronicled their mother's life, from her early years to her marriage and the birth of her children. But as they read further, they discovered entries that revealed a side of Lydia they had never known. "I met him again today," one entry read. "He's so kind and understanding. I can't help but feel drawn to him, even though I know it's wrong." Elliot's heart sank. Who is she talking about? They continued reading, piecing together a story of a man their mother had met years ago, someone who had been a source of comfort during difficult times. The entries were filled with guilt and longing, suggesting a deep emotional connection. Mia's eyes widened. "Do you think this man could be related to her memory issues?" Elliot shook his head. "I don't know, but it's clear she never resolved her feelings for him. Maybe confronting this part of her past is the key." That evening, they sat down with Lydia, the journal in hand. "Mum," Elliot said gently, "we found your journal. We need to talk about what's in it." Lydia's face went pale, her hands trembling. "You had no right." Mia took her hand. "Mum, we're worried about you. We think this man, whoever he is, might be connected to what's happening." Tears welled up in Lydia's eyes. "His name was David. He was an old friend, someone I turned to when things with your father were difficult. But I ended it, for the sake of our family." Elliot felt a pang of sympathy. "Have you spoken to him since?" Lydia shook her head. "No, I never saw him again, but I think about him often, too often." Mia squeezed her mother's hand. "Maybe it's time to find closure, to let go of the past." Lydia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how." Elliot had an idea. "What if we tried to find him? Reach out and see if he's willing to meet?" Lydia looked conflicted but eventually agreed. Over the next few days they searched for David, using every resource at their disposal. Finally, they located him living in a nearby town. Elliot arranged a meeting at a quiet cafe. Lydia was visibly nervous, but Elliot and Mia were there to support her. When David walked in, Lydia's face lit up with recognition and emotion. They talked for hours, sharing memories, regrets, and apologies. David was kind and understanding, just as Lydia had described. By the end of the conversation, Lydia looked lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The weeks that followed brought noticeable improvement. Lydia's memory lapses became less frequent, and she seemed more present and engaged. Elliot and Mia continued to support her, ensuring she stayed connected to her friends and community. Elliot returned to San Francisco, but he kept in close contact with his family. He realized that while his structured life had its merits, there was room for flexibility and spontaneity. He started taking time to explore new hobbies, make new friends, and embrace the unexpected. One evening, as he played the piano in his apartment, an instrument he hadn't touched in years, he thought about the journey he had taken. It had been a path filled with uncertainty and emotion, but it had also brought him closer to his family and helped him rediscover parts of himself he had long forgotten. As the final notes of a familiar melody echoed through the room, Elliot felt a sense of peace. Life, he realized, was a beautiful, unpredictable journey, and sometimes the most important steps were the ones we never planned to take. The end.